With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome to Heard Tell. Okay, we did something different, but it's actually something we've done before years ago when we were still doing Heard Tell as a radio show every morning. We had a fun thing for a couple of years where we would bring on our buddy Ben Harris from the UK and do a live American UK thing for the 4th of July, just a fun thing to kind of talk about. He loves America. For the podcasting audience, this one was really fun because he shows up wearing an American soccer jersey with an American flag over his shoulder and went completely overboard because that's what he does. But it's good stuff. If you don't know Ben, he's a great follow on social media. He's been a friend for years. He has worked for a member of Parliament and now works for Parliament directly in the UK. So he knows what's going on inside the government. He's been in Westminster for years and years now. And he has great perspectives. Plus, he loves America. And if you're wondering how much of an American he is, he voluntarily decided to be a Baltimore Orioles baseball fan. So I don't know what that says about his character, but we love Ben. So this is a wide-ranging conversation we did on the 4th of July because I've been a little bit infirmed and under the weather. Nothing major. I had a little bout of anemia where I can't really go out and travel right now until I get this squared away. So I was home pretty much alone for the 4th of July weekend. And I was like, why not do a big live? And we went almost 2 hours. So this is actually going to be something kind of rare for Heard Tell. We're going to break this into two parts. So part one is right here. After this, you'll go over to the other, to the next thing down on your playlist. Listen to part two. But Ben Harris on the 250th American anniversary of independence, the 4th of July. Hope you like it. And please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing on the Substack, heardtellmedia.com, one-stop shopping for everything, and we appreciate you so very much. So, without further ado, let's celebrate America by talking to the English and see what they think of their traitorous colonies 250 years later. Ben Harris on Heard Tell right now. I love it. All right, we're here with Ben Harris, our buddy, and this is the second time he has soccer jerseyed me because, fun fact, we were going to go live back when we were doing this as a radio show, and he said, what do I wear? I was like, well, business casual, whatever, and he's like, well, I'll be coming from work, great, and he's got on, this shirt, vest kind of combo thing, and as soon as I hit record, he rips it off, and he's got his Aston Villa jersey on underneath it, and he did the whole thing in his Aston Villa jersey, so this is twice you've done this to me, young man. You've done the soccer jersey, but at least it's the right color. Are you going to be able to walk around in England in that thing? Is it going to be all right? Yeah. What's going on with this?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, most people, my mum said it looks like Dennis the Menace, so I hardly wouldn't even probably know where it's from. So,
oh my goodness. Yeah. Did you have Dennis the Menace in England?
Yeah, I thought it was from the UK. Is it not?
I don't know. Because I've always thought of it as, of course, the cartoon strip, and then the Walter Matthau version, I think, is the best.
I think there's an English version of it. So I watched the English version growing up, and it wasn't.
Was it like The Office, where it was good in England, and then it was here, but it's different?
Yeah, I don't know which version came first. Obviously, I know The Office came first, but Dennis the Menace, I'm not sure.
Anyway, it is the 4th of July. Unfortunately, I don't get to be up yonder, but I did wear my up yonder gear. I've got it on. So I miss our folks up yonder, but I was like, well, adapt and overcome. If I'm stuck at the house, let's at least talk about it. Buddy, how are you? How's it been? How's jolly old England? Because y'all had the heat wave a couple weeks ago, and now we're having it now. So
yeah, it's good. It's a bit more pleasant now. It was awful a few weeks ago. It was absolutely unbearable. Just humidity, everything about it. I was in the office one of the days. Actually, that was fine because my office was air conditioned, but most places here aren't air conditioned.
Oh, well, let's just start there because that's been the big running thing is AC, no AC, and we'll just start right there because I was in Europe in 2003 when they had the really bad heat wave and 30,000 people died. I'll say that number again: 30,000 people died. Almost half of those were in France. We're talking about American greatness. Look, the fastest economic growing area in the entire world is the American Southeast and Texas. Those places don't grow without air conditioning. It's an economic thing. It's a humanitarian thing. You just said it. Your office has air conditioning, but the part that the American thing is the UK has a massive energy crisis right now. And energy is probably second only to the housing crisis, and those two things probably go together really well. Energy is a big deal, so it's not as easy as just slapping air conditioning in old buildings. Y'all got energy problems where you probably can't handle an AC grid, number one. Number two is nobody be able to afford it.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, in some ways, I think the energy crisis is worse than the housing crisis, because the housing crisis, at least in the last...
I mean, it's chicken and egg, right? It's like...
Yeah, the housing crisis has... prices have sort of stagnated a little bit because our economy stagnated. But the energy crisis, the energy prices since the Russian invasion of Ukraine have gone up, immensely. And the problem really is that we were too reliant on Russian gas and European gas in general. And the basic problem is that our planning system, and I said this before, our planning system is so backwards. So our planning system gives effectively a veto for, NIMBYs, a small number of NIMBYs, to basically veto any sort of national infrastructure projects, housing projects, anything. So as a result, it costs a lot more money to get energy infrastructure in the ground. A good example is pylons. So overhead pylons to bring electricity, they cost a certain amount. If they go underground, they cost about 4 times more. But because of NIMBYs, we have to put them underground a lot. And that's the problem. And it just costs too much to build the energy infrastructure here. And as a result, we're very reliant on gas. We're very reliant on, external shocks to the energy market affect us more. And yeah, it's a big problem. And it's a problem in Europe in general, but it's a big problem here especially.
Let's walk through this, because this is one thing. I just did another podcast. I was talking about the UK stuff because you had just had the political turnover and Andy Barnum and all that's going on. The system of government, it's not just the parliamentary system that's different, although that's vastly different. And it's not just the quasi-rural, where you still have the trappings of the rural stuff, but Parliament's pretty much what they say go, with very few exceptions. You just mentioned it without using the term, so walk people through the term. Council level government in the UK is kind of where everything's broken down right now. And people, especially an American audience, maybe the Canadian internet, because even the Canadian parliamentary system is very different than the UK's in a lot of ways. That council system and the way it feeds into Parliament, you just saw that with the Burnham election. That's where the breakdown really, really is in the UK right now. And that's all the local stuff that's doing things like zoning and building and all that. It's also where you start seeing the first effects of a lot of the state agency stuff where you're going to spend your money. That's really the breakdown. But explain how that works in the UK, because that's a vast difference in how the American system works.
Yeah, so as I understand it, I think in the American system, if your building is up to code, then you get approval. Whereas here, essentially, there's always like a consultation period. And like if for example, say McDonald's wants to open a a good example actually is we've got a supermarket. They want to open near another supermarket here, and they have to go. Even the land there's nothing on the land. It's not even in a residential area. It's right on the edge of town. It's a good area for it. But because there's a supermarket next to it, they are able to frustrate the process and prevent the other supermarket, their competition, from opening. And it's the same any sort of building you do. You have to get planning permission for almost anything. And if, for example, you want to put something in your garden. You have to get planning permission for it, and your neighbours can object to it, and it can be the most silly, trivial things, and they can object to it. And so, as I said, effectively, everyone has a veto on building, and it frustrates growth. It's a huge problem here. But the worst thing about it is that there doesn't seem to be any real desire for change among people. You mentioned Andy Burnham. Now, Andy Burnham was mayor of Manchester. And they actually did build quite a lot under his tenure. They were one of the fastest growing parts of the UK, and that's one of the reasons why he's relatively popular at the moment. But he did a Reddit Q&A yesterday, and he was asked about a lot of the issues with the UK. And one of the issues that came up was HS2, which is high-speed rail 2. And that's been a really big project. That's been a bit, over budget, over time. It's been a disaster. And he was asked about it. And he said that, one of the problems was that local communities weren't given enough of a say. When actually that's exactly the problem. Because the reason why HS2 has taken so long is because instead of just building it, they had to build a lot of it underground because the local NIMBYs objected to various parts of it being built. So he's completely missed the point, and I have absolutely no faith that he's going to ever, get close to reforming this system. He might just make it worse, because people think that, consulting with communities, and often by communities, what they mean is residents groups who are well motivated to block anything, usually older people with more time in their hands, who don't have a stake in the future, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and one thing I've talked about, and I want to get to your piece here in a minute about American exceptionalism and your love affair with America, which you're literally wearing on your sleeve today. So thank you for making that metaphor nice and easy, buddy. Even though your Orioles beat my Reds last night, but we won't talk about that.
Oh yeah, we did, yeah.
No, okay, that's enough of that. Back to the topic. I think there's a real correlation between the young people problem the UK is having, because you is one, and a lot of our other friends were talking about. I just wrote about this a week or so ago, again, with the Burnham chances and all that. It's like, there's about to be a generational cliff for the UK because what you just talked about. The older people are running over, the councils are just running roughshod over even the national government in a lot of ways. The housing crisis is bad. The job crisis is bad. The energy crisis is bad. And you've got the cream of the crop of the current millennial and Gen Z working ages, that 25 to 40 demographic that should be the core of your country for the next 30 years. They can't get jobs and they can't get housing.
Yeah.
And because of the Commonwealth system, they got options. They can go to the continent. They can go to the Commonwealth countries. They can come to America or whatever. You talk about it because you're living in and experiencing it. I know I've talked to you when you were working in Parliament about the ridiculous commute you had to deal with.
Well, I'm back in Parliament now, so it's
and you're back now in a different role. But so again, he knows what he's talking about, guys. He tromps around Westminster. Talk about that from your viewpoint, because I think that's something that Americans take for granted, even with the problems we're having with higher ed. And no, we have a lot of opportunities still. There's some real doom and gloom with the, let's call it under 40 demographic right now in the UK.
Yeah, exactly. So, housing is a big part of it. I know there's a housing problem in the US too, but I don't think it's as bad. We have probably people my age. I still live with my parents at 32. I'm very close to buying a house off them. But it's taken a lot of saving. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people are in their 30s. They're sharing really expensive flats in London, into their 30s and 40s. They can't go on the housing ladder, so they can't have kids. The job situation it's all interconnected with the fact that we can't build anything. The fact that we're not a country that's set up to grow. We're a country that's set up to sort of preserve what we have rather than actually grow the pie, and that's the problem. And I think a lot of it is also, blame the governments and blame the politicians, but actually a lot of it is down to people themselves. People in this country generally, they've got a rationing mindset. They don't believe that you can grow the pie. Instead of building more reservoirs, building more energy infrastructure to bring more energy and bring more resources, their sort of approach is, well, how can we ration it better? How can we ration it best? And the current government, they've not helped at all with regards to growth. Keir Starmer promised to, be really serious about growth and get the country growing again. And he had a huge majority and a huge mandate to do that. And he basically did nothing. In fact, if anything, he made it worse. He put up taxes on, I think, the national insurance. It made it harder for employees to hire people. And as a result, since the government came in, unemployment's got even worse, and it's just a doom spiral. And I don't really know how we get out of it, because Burnham doesn't seem to have any answers. And to be honest, I'm not really sure Farage and Reform do either, because that's the thing. People say, Nigel Farage and Reform, they're Thatcherites, they're neoliberal, right-wing conservatives, etc. But they often have the same pressures when it comes to older people. In fact, if anything, they're more beholden to the NIMBYs. So I don't expect too much change to them either.
This is I just wrote about this the other day, is that we have the 6th going out the door. We know who the 7th is, and I was joking, we already know who the 8th's going to be, and he's going to fail too. That was kind of my joke on it. To be fair, and I think this is a lesson America needs to learn from our British cousins for a little while. A lot of this is, I think Parliament is trying to solve things politically that are structural problems, and you cannot politically and ideologically solve structural problems with politically popular ideology, because the stuff to fix the structure isn't popular.
Yeah.
And that's the doom loop that the UK stuck in. And it's not that America's immune to it. It's just we have 330 million people in climbing. You've got 44-ish, something along those lines.
About 70 million, I think, people.
Is it that much now? Is it higher than that? So we have a lot more people. We have a much bigger economy. We're going to get away with it for longer, but we've got the same problem. We've got a debt problem. We've got a health crisis. We've got Social Security insolvency. We got all that. Y'all have pension problems and NHS problems and a demographic problem. It's just you're a smaller country with a smaller economy, so you can't get away with it anymore. And you're going to have to make those hard calls. It's not that it ain't coming here. It's just you're going first. And I think we should learn the lessons of it. It's like, look, math is math. You can either do it the hard way or the really hard way. And it looks like our UK friends are deciding to do it the really hard way because they don't want to tackle the structural problems. So you have this dichotomy of we have a demographic crisis, but we're going to just beat our head into the wall on immigration. We have a budget crisis, but NHS is untouchable no matter how much it's not working. We want to be a world power, but we can't fund our Ministry of Defense. Like, this is just structural stuff that a buzzword isn't going to fix.
I mean, yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I think the thing that probably highlights it best is obviously Starmer and Labour are very unpopular. But there was recently like a word cloud they did of why do you hate, what have the government done wrong? And by far more than anything else, it was the winter fuel allowance. So when Starmer first came in, a few months into office, he had the idea of means testing this winter fuel allowance, which was essentially a handout given to pensioners of all ages, of all incomes. And it's wrong. I mean, if you're a wealthy pensioner, you should not be getting free money from the government just willy-nilly. It's wrong. And the government tried to, in fairness to them, I thought it was a good thing. They probably could have implemented it better, but they did try and reform it. And it was so unpopular, they had to U-turn. And that was it for them. They tried this one little thing to bring some balance back. And they were crucified for it. And then Burnham's not going to try. He's not going to try and touch that. He's already said the triple lock is essentially untouchable.
Explain what that is. People don't know. It's not directly analogous to our Social Security system, but it's kind of the same base core issue. Just explain triple lock to them real quick. So
triple lock, I think, it's the pensions will not rise. Pensions will rise every year, the state pension, by the rate of inflation. Oh, what's the other one? There's something else and something else.
Cost of living, I forget what the other one is.
Whichever is higher. Yeah, it's like let me look up. It's so it's there we go. Let's have a look. Yeah, average earnings, the rate of inflation, or 2.5%, whichever is highest. Which right now is probably inflation, and it just rises every year. Whichever is highest, it rises on that, and it doesn't really bear any relation to the real economy. So average wages can stagnate, but the pension triple lock still rises every year because we've got stagflation, and it still rises. And it's essentially a wealth transfer from people who are younger and working to people who are older. And obviously there are people who are older who do need support, and I get that. But the problem is a lot of support for the elderly is not means tested, and people who are wealthy get it anyway, and that's not fair. But you try and tackle that, and you can't, because the elderly demographic tend to vote the most, and no one's willing to tackle it, and it's just it's a doom loop.
Yeah, and elderly people with money are the number one political donors. That's a universal thing, whether you're in England or America or Swahili land or anywhere else. Elderly people have money. Elderly people have time on their hands. They're the most politically active. They love to give money to politics. So that's the problem we got now where, the boomer thing's overdone in America. Look, my parents are boomers because I'm kind of generationally offset a little bit. My parents are boomers, but like the boomers have all the wealth in America right now. With people are screaming about billionaires. All the boomers put together have more money than the billionaires do. But which one sounds better on Twitter? We don't want to talk about it because then it's like, don't you attack those old retirees? Like, yeah, well, the old retirees got all the money. Yeah. A lot of them do. But it's a universal problem of, and the older I get, the less ideologically I get. I was like, look, this is just a math thing. There's a trade-off. If you're going to have government that gives out pensions, you either have means tests and say these people get and these people don't, which is a hard conversation to have, or you have a government that can't do math going forward because they're going to give out more than they can bring in and it's never going to balance. And both of our countries have decided to do just give out the money and don't deal with the politically tough part. It's just we're going to get away with it longer because we got a better economy.
Yeah, also you're a younger country as well. I think and you have that you have more of a draw in terms of attracting businesses and immigrants and stuff. But I mean, it's the same in France. I mean, France, whenever the government tries to, the French pension system is so lenient. I think the retirement age is ridiculously low. Whenever they try and raise it a little bit, in response to rising, the average life expectancy, they riot over it, literally. So it's how do you even tackle this? And it feels like we're going to get to a stage where, in 20 years' time, there's going to be a shrinking number of young working people who are going to be working to basically support this huge demographic of older people, many of whom are asset rich. And it's, how do you fix that without having, and that's the problem with what I think, this is what annoys me with Starmer has done so much, is the fact that he came in with this huge majority. He had leeway to fix it, or at least, to fix it a little bit. And he messed up, and he didn't even really try. And when he did it in a really bad way. And it's just, well, where do you even go from that? And it's hard not to be very pessimistic.
It's closer than you think. I looked it up. It's 41.5 to 39.3. It kind of surprised me a little bit, the median age.
Yeah.
That sort of surprised me, because you think we're a much younger country, but not really. It's interesting. Let me spin it back this way a little bit. When you look at America's system of governments right now, look, we've taken some lumps on the national stage because of the mess between, whatever you think of President Trump, he has his own style. Of course, we had President Biden, and then his cognitive decline, which was a little embarrassing. Now we have President Trump completely off the leash doing whatever he wants, which, I find it embarrassing, and a lot of the world does, but some people like it apparently. You're looking at it from afar. How do you balance it? Because I know there's those jokes like, well, for years and years and years in England, the parliamentary system was a lot more stable when it came to your national leaders. Well, now you're getting ready. When's the convention? The third week of July, that Andy Burnham will officially become PM, something like that. So, you're getting ready to have your 7th PM in 10 years. I don't think the joke holds up anymore. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I mean, in the US, of course, you have your term limits. The president is, the president and parliament and congressional elections are set, every 2 years for Congress, and it's, every third of the Senate for every 6 years, and it's just all very set in stone. They have to work with that. Whereas here, it's basically just based on, who can command a majority of parliament. And I think that the problem is, because we've had so much stagnation lately, I think Brexit did distract from a lot of issues for quite a long time. That was a sort of 3 years when nothing got done, because it was just all about Brexit and people trying to stop Brexit, or people trying to implement their own version of Brexit. But because we stagnate so much, people are it's such a dysfunctional system right now. I think that's why there's such a high turnover. But on the other hand, from afar, something I've always found odd with the American system is you've almost got too much democracy. Especially the primary system, where you've seen recent primaries where you've got really far left Democrats who are winning, beating these incumbents in these safe seats. But of course, where you have both parties, left, Republicans and Democrats. They have extremists who win these seats and win these primaries, and it's basically a lesser of the two evils will end up winning the general election, because basically where the Democratic Party base is, where Republican Party base is, as I understand, not where the American people are. You look at all these politicians. For all the hype around Mamdani, he underperformed in New York. The only reason he won was because it was New York, which is a Democratic state. But look at Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's a moderate.
Adams and Cuomo were about the two worst, most really, that's what you could come. Actually, that's a fair point to bring up, though, is one of the differences, because where you have party leadership, part of the thing with Starmer is because he was the one that led labor for so long and led him out of the wilderness and brought him back, there wasn't a heir apparent set up yet, because it kind of took him by surprise how fast this thing went. That's just logistically what happened. They didn't have anybody next in line because they weren't prepared for him to go down that fast. It's just the thing. Whereas we also have elections in America where you don't know who's getting in there. It's not really controlled by the party as much as people probably think it is. And you have these wild cards show up. So I don't know that it's one system's better than the other. I think it's just two different problems based on here's where the party completely controlled it, and Labor had their, I don't know if it was completely historic, but at least in the modern era, Labor had the biggest, it feels weird even 2 years later saying that Labor had the biggest majority of the modern era.
Yeah.
19 months ago.
Look at Blair. I mean, Blair won his majority. It was a similar size. I think Blair won a couple more seats, but it was basically the same sort of majority.
Yeah.
When Blair won in 1997, He was popular for years. They won exactly the same landslide in like 2001, 2005. They, even despite Iraq, which was unpopular, they still won a fairly big majority. And it took years for New Labour to become stale. Starmer's Labour was stale within 6 months. And I mean, part of that's down to him and the way he is. I was open to him. I didn't vote Labour. I didn't vote for anyone in the last election because I was quite disenfranchised and disillusioned. But I thought Starmer could be an okay prime minister. That didn't happen. He's been far worse than I thought he'd be. But on the other hand, as well, there is also the structural problems we talked about. And yeah, he tries to do anything, and his backbenchers rebel. And what's the point of having a big majority if you can't control it? So. It's a system which is rapidly falling apart.
Well, we got the same problem because our system. I got into this debate with the Supreme Court. We had all these real heavy Supreme Court rulings this past week because it was the end of the Supreme Court term, and I took some flack from our blue sky friends, and that's okay because they're a little bit more hardcore, to the left of the spectrum, and Twitter's a little bit more of a free for all to the right, give or take. And that's fine. I get along with everybody that wants to get along and have a conversation. But we were talking about like the Supreme Court. Everybody's banging on the Supreme Court, and they do have some bad decisions. But it's like, well, wait a minute. Part of the problem with the Supreme Court right now is they're saying they're trying to make a three-legged stool work with one leg right now because the executive's all out of whack, and Congress won't do anything to reel in the executive, and everybody wants the court to do it because it's easier to take a lawsuit to the Supreme Court than try to get something through Congress. So our entire system of government's out of whack right now. And then if there's a theme of the Roberts Court, I know people are going to be like, well, it's this and it's Dodd, and they're like, no. The theme of the Roberts Courts, if you actually read the major opinions, and I actually do read them, at least the summary. I don't read all. Look, I'm not going to claim I read all the decisions because you just can't. Like the birthright citizenship was 197 pages of dissents and partial dissent. Like, nah, I'm good. But I read all the summaries of the original. The theme of the Roberts Court is Congress is supposed to fix this. Why are we dealing with this? Congress needs to fix this. Over and over and over again, they say this. And then everybody comes out and goes, we got to fix the Supreme Court. It's like, well, no, wait a minute. We have control over Congress, but that's the part we don't take control of at all. Whereas y'all have the parliamentary system, you have direct control over everything because with some very, very finite legal things that the high courts can intervene in, basically whatever Parliament says over there goes. You don't have, constitutional checks and balances. You don't have the executive. You don't have the Supreme Court overriding laws. So y'all even more on paper, you have more direct control than we do. But in some ways, you take less direct control than we do, if that even makes sense. It's very weird.
I think part of the problem is that MPs and it's MPs over the years have become like glorified sort of councillors. They're expected to sort of be very hyper local focused, and there's almost it's gone too far the other way. So, for example, back in 100 years ago, Winston Churchill, who was of course an MP for a long time, he would have barely been in his seat. He was very focused on big picture. The problem now is the opposite. We don't have a lot of MPs aren't interested in tackling national issues, tackling these long-term issues. They're more focused on the constituents because, I suppose, that's the way constituents feel it should be. We've got a politics really which is it just feels like it's breaking down. And I think the social media age, social media plays a big role here. Everyone's living in different echo chambers, and it's making everything out of whack. Hardly anyone can agree on anything anymore because we're getting our informations from different places, and people are living in different realities. It's the same in the US from what I've seen. It's people, on the one side you've got people who live in this reality, people live in this reality, people live in this reality, and it's like, well, how do you bring them together? They get in fundamentally different things, and you've got hostile foreign actors who then muddy the waters of that because they do. Yeah,
and we got the same problem here. But the other thing is, boy, how much trouble you want to cause on this podcast? I could get into it. I mean, we could talk about Belgravia is basically Little Russia for like how far you want to take this, but it's true that look, London's always going to have, I should say England, but really it's London because there's London and there's England. Let's just call it what it is. There's always going to be this push-pull with the continent, with the UK. Always. There's no way around that.
Mm-hmm.
And what Brexit, if we step back from Brexit for a second and look at it historically for a minute, I was all for England pulling out of Brexit if they chose to do so and voted to do so. I'm an American. I've got, my feelings on freedom and voting. Like, I'm with Meckham. I think you should get what you vote for good and hard, right? Like, that's where I'm at on it. the problem with the Brexit thing was, and the EU did it on purpose because they wanted to try to make an example of it, is like, there's no way the UK and the EU can't have a economical relationship. It has to, for everybody's good. Yeah. And the fact that you politically decided we're not going to have any relationships, like, well, no, that's not going to work. We know that. And then I think that's where the ideology and the terminology and some of the foreign influence, that's the crack that they got into. It wasn't the, I think, fair principle of the EU's got too much power over the UK. I think that was a fair argument. But then it goes all the way to the wall of, we're not going to have anything to do with the EU under any circumstances. Like, well, no, that's lunacy. That's just not taking reality. And it just went all the way here. And then the EU saw their one chance to dogpile the one dissenter, and, well, let's make an example of them because, Brussels thinks way too highly of themselves. Sorry, I know we're playing Belgium Monday, so we got to get our digs in. But Brussels thinks way too highly of themselves, and they just saw their chance to come off top rope and really make it hurt, and they did. From afar, I'm just watching like, man, this is just mutually destructive when you guys have to have a symbolic relationship. They need one of those too, symbiotic relationship of some form and fashion here, because there's no way this doesn't work. And then I see the exact same ideology and funding streams in America that are screaming isolationism in America. And it's the same people with the same funding streams, with the same backgrounds in both the UK and here. That nationalistic, isolationist, we don't need the world. Who cares what happens in the world? Like, well, you better. If you like your cheap goods, if you like your cheap energy, if you like a peaceful world, because I like having a peaceful world. I've been in warfare in other places because we had to be there. It's not fun. I don't want to do that. I don't want my kids doing that. If you want a peaceful world, you have to be engaged in the world all the time, not just when you feel like it. If you want world economy ripping, you got to be engaged all the time. And I think kind of the problem with the Brexit thing, and it goes into the isolationist and the nationalist problem America politics has right now, is if you don't rein it in, it just goes to that wall where you're not in reality anymore of, no, you really do have to work with other people or this ain't going to work. And now you're going to have a lot of pain involved.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, during the Brexit debates, there was extremists sort of within the Leave camp who wanted. And my boss Michael, he was a big Leaver, but he was also a pragmatist. He wanted a deal. He knew that a deal was important eventually, but there were some who just wanted, they wanted no cooperation whatsoever, and that was not realistic. But I think the thing people often mistake about foreign influence operations, people often say, oh, well, Russia and Putin, they wanted Brexit. I don't think they wanted Brexit as such. They just wanted division.
They wanted the chaos.
They wanted the chaos, yeah. And they also, I suspect, had a hand in some of the rejoin and the second referendum stuff, because that caused a lot of problems. And that's what they want. They don't care which side wins. They just want it to drag out and distract from what they're doing, what they're doing elsewhere. And that's the point. But yeah, Brexit is one of those issues, and I think it's also been a cultural thing that people hold on to. Like a good example is a lot of these people now who are very pro EU. They go around with the EU flags everywhere. Before Brexit, they were not really that sort of keen on the EU. They latched onto it as like a cultural thing, and it's become a cultural replacement.
Identity.
Yeah,
they take an identity and you supplement policy and ideology with identity. We're seeing the same thing with. And it's everybody, oh, he's both sides again. Well, when both sides quit doing it, I'll quit both sides. But, MAGA is an identity movement. It really is. It's an identity movement. But so is our progressive friends.
Yeah, and I actually did an article about a year ago saying that people need to stop treating politics like a football team. And actually, I think people should be encouraged to get into sports, because actually, sports is a good way to draw off tribalism from the political system. I'm very tribal when it comes to Villa. I'm very tribal. I'm very obnoxious. I'm very tribal.
You're saying this in a USA jersey. I just want to point that out.
Yeah. But I'm very tribal. Like when it comes to football, not so much nationally. I'm less tribal there. When it comes to my team, the Orioles and Villa, I am very tribal. And if you're another team, I will hate you regardless. I only like my own team. But it's a way of it gets out of your system. It's a healthy form of competition. When politics is not suited to tribalism, it shouldn't be. It doesn't make it work, and that's the problem. People are also having politics as a substitute for a community or a sport, and it's just not good for anyone.
You would never in a million years guess the English team I keep up with. Like if I put a gun to your parents' head, you couldn't figure it out.
What league are they in?
And it's not, no, because it ain't a Premier League team either.
Is it like Championship or League?
They have been. I'll give you one hint because you're never going to get this. They have been a Premier League team at one time. They have not been for a long time though. In fact, they were one of the original Premier League teams.
It's not Sheffield United, is it?
No.
Oh, Sheffield Wednesday.
No, Oldham.
Oh, not something like Bradford. No, Bradford were only in for a couple of seasons. Wimbledon. I don't know. Wimbledon maybe.
Oldham.
How did you get into Oldham?
So they have this is off topic, but I don't care. It's my show. So I was stationed in Frankfurt for years.
Yeah.
And this is the old Vault Stadium before they rebuilt it for the World Cup. The old, iron built like that. Man, that thing moved on you. And you go in there and they're shooting flares at each other, and like it's crazy. I love it. The Waldstadt and the old Vault Stadium. But we were at a game, and it turns out Frankfurt Eintracht and Oldham have a long-standing supporter relationship. They still do to this day. So I was at the Frankfurt game, and then all of a sudden, way up in the corner, Double Bowl Stadium, there's a bunch of guys in blue shirts up there, like just acting the fool. I'm like, did they come to the wrong? And they were playing Dortmund, so it's yellow and red, right? Black and red and yellow. There's these guys in blue shirts. I'm like, did they go to the wrong game? What's going on with that? And they were Oldham supporters. That was their travel game they do every year. Frankfurt sends some guys over there, and the Oldham guys were up in that corner. I was like, all right, I got to check this out. So I worked my way around, went and talked to him. I'm like, explain this to me. I'm like 22, 23. I don't know anything about anything. It's the first major soccer game I've ever been to. And there was like 17 or 18 of them. They're like, yeah, we do this every year. Some of us come over, and then they'll come over one game, and we have a supporter agreement and whatever. And I'm like, this is very cool. It reminded me of kind of our college football culture, where you have, the rivalry games, and they'll do some tailgating together, and, there'll be some fun back and forth. But that's how I got to know who they are. So I've kind of just kept up with them over the years. So they're very bad. They're coming back now. They got promoted back up to somewhat respectable. They got a local business guy that bought them out and is putting some good money into them, and they'll be okay. But yeah, anyway, that's how I got into. That was my entry.
It's always interesting to meet Americans and foreigners who don't follow the top teams. They follow different, lower teams.
I try to follow people I actually connect with, and so like I keep up with Frankfurt because I live there. And that was my first real soccer experience outside of the U.S. And we had German exchange students. We had a soccer team one year while I was in school because we had German exchange students and an Austrian exchange student. And it was 96. So it was after the 94 World Cup. And that's how we got into soccer. But anyway, yeah. And by the way, that last night was one of the best soccer games. That was one of the best sporting events.
Argentina, Cape Verde.
That is one of the best sporting events I've ever watched. My whole household was just riveted. We were living on every bit of it. When I thought that last goal they were going to tie one more time, it's like it was a freaking Disney movie, man.
Yeah, it was really good. And Cape Verde, remember, I think they're ranked 13th from Africa, something like 69th in the world. They are Cape Verde have no right to be doing this well, and they've really pushed them all the way.
They were ranked 69th out of 64 qualifying teams. That was the joke they were talking about. I love it. Let's talk about America for a minute. I put the link in the chat for folks who want to know. Ben put it on Substack. I've cross-posted it to Ordinary Times. It's up there for the American audience that sometimes things are weird, or if you don't want to do Substack. There's been a big debate, especially in the last week running up into the 250, and then Mamdani gave his speech, really lit this off last couple of days, and then Trump gave his speech, which lit it off the other way. And we have this back and forth. We were having this debate over American exceptionalism. Is it a real thing? And if it is, what does it mean? And I know I have my thoughts on it that are pretty well honed at this point. But when you hear that term sitting there in your USA jersey being a, kiss up, friends hold friends accountable. Sorry. When you hear the term American exceptionalism, though, because, you not only know your history and you're not only a well-educated and well-spoken guy, you work in Parliament. Like, you understand how governments actually work and don't work. So you see it from both sides. When you see American exceptionalism or you hear that term, what's it mean to you?
So American exception to me is it's the identity. There's a really good quote actually at the end of my article. Let me see if I can find it. It was some random person on Twitter, but it was a great quote, and I don't think it could really, you wouldn't really apply it to any other country in the world. Somebody said on Twitter, and I find the quote just now. They said, There are Americans all over the world. They just happen to be born elsewhere and haven't made it home yet. There's something about America which just attracts people, and it's because it's a relatively new country. It's less rooted in sort of blood and soil, and it's less rooted in birth and more rooted in what you believe, your ideals. This idea that anyone can become an American. You can go to another country and you can never truly be with them. Whereas America, because it's a nation built on immigrants, I know that's a cliche, but it is. It's this idea of, there's something about it. I can't quite explain it, but there's this something about the American outlook, and it's one of the three things I highlighted in my essay, as it were, was the abundance, diversity, and freedom. And freedom was the biggest one for me. There's a certain way Americans tend to look at the world, regardless of left or right, which I think is quite unique, and it's the way you. I think it comes from your history, a lot of it, because you grew up as a country that rebelled against colonial masters, us, over tax, and it's the way that you look at the world, and it's the way that the importance you place on freedom and principles. And I think America's not a perfect country, and there's a lot of things I think you do worse than us, and it's not going to ever be perfect, but it's not hard to see why people idolize it and want to move there every year. There is definitely something there, intangible, about America. I think this idea that it can constantly reinvent itself. It's a constantly changing, canvas of everything. It's essentially, I feel, in a way, it's almost like a representation of humanity. An imperfect one, a very imperfect one, but it's everyone comes there and contributes, and it's just. I mean, if you could compare, for example, immigrants to America tend to integrate and be far more successful than immigrants to most other countries, and there's a reason for that, and that's American exceptionalism to me. It's the fact that you can come there and then just integrate, straight away, and you don't really get that anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because, like, when I first started traveling worldwide, and because I was in the military, so it was a little different, but living in Europe twice, being all around the world, being in the Middle East, being in Southwest Asia, been to the Horn of Africa. I've kind of been geographically all over the world, quite literally.
Mm.
It's always interesting watching the reaction when, look, we're not subtle. Like, people know immediately you're an American as soon as you start talking, without exception. It doesn't matter where I can be in Thailand, I can be in Sicily, I can be in England. Like, as soon as you start talking, they know you're an American immediately. Everybody, whether they speak English or not, they just know it. And I always thought that's just kind of a weird thing. And then I started thinking, I was like, no, that's the thing in and of itself. Like, we're one of the few countries where you can just tell an American almost immediately.
Yeah.
And there's just something about it. And it never really hit me until the second time I lived in Germany. And maybe it was different because I was a little bit older. I had my family with me that time. I was single the first time I was over there. But traveling with my family, and, you go to the tourist spots too, but we tried to, you'd go to like the Neuschwansteins or whatever, but we tried to go to like, a lot of mom and pop stuff. Like we'd stay at a beer garden and stay in the room upstairs and do stuff like that, non-touristy stuff on purpose. And the way people reacted to having a young family of Americans traveling was one of the really amazing things. Because one is they were, I had 4 kids, which is a little unusual. Big families in Europe's a little unusual. So everybody's staring at you anyway. And I had an American minivan, so you kind of stuck out, and finding parking was not fun sometimes. I'll tell you about trying to park a minivan in Amsterdam sometime. That's another story for another day. But there was a train ride involved from the parking spot. That's how far out we had to go. But the thing about it is, especially with a young family, they were just gobsmacked that you had a large family and that you were traveling. Like, it just took people off guard. It's like, you have this large family and you're traveling. And then I started learning why. I was like, okay, for a family of 6 to travel in Germany, you're basically almost automatically at least upper middle class or higher economically just to be able to do that.
Mm.
Driving in Germany is a very much middle class and up thing, because you just can't afford it, really, because you have to pay to go to the classes, and you got to pay for the insurance, and you got to pay German taxes. You got, you only have 2 tax brackets in Germany. It's 40, I forget. It's like 42 and 48 or 44 and 48. It's one or the other. There's only 2 tax brackets, and then you got the VAT tax on top of that. So you're paying 60% taxes for everything but food and healthcare, basically. And you just start learning how taxation and government and how the different systems affect things like people don't have large families because you just can't afford it. Literally, you just can't afford to have that many kids, or you're going to be because the way the system's set up. And you just learn intrinsically things that you just take for granted in America. Like, it's no big deal to go to a restaurant and see a family of 3 or 4 kids. You never see that in Europe, hardly ever, especially, Western Europe, France, Germany. You never see small families like that in you growing. You don't see it in England that much anymore, unless it's an immigrant family.
Well,
it's things like that hits you.
I mean, America, though, you do have a declining birth rate. That's the thing, even American.
Yeah. But we hear that, but then you don't ever really see it. You don't see it in my family. Then, it used to be my little cousins that are all 10, 12 years younger than me. They're all having like 3, 4, 5 kids each, but that's our family. We're weird about stuff like that. We like to breed, folks. We're doing our part for the birth rate. But, I got 4 daughters, and they're all adults now. And they're all, my oldest is getting ready to have my first grandchild here. And in fact, I can't travel. They're actually at the baby shower today for the grandbaby that's coming end of August. So that's the stage of life we're at now, where the kids are all adults and they're starting to have their own families. And you start thinking, and I'm missing my family reunion today, which I hate. That family reunion is because it's my mom's family. It's the house my grandmother moved into when they lost their house to eminent domain. It's the house my mom grew up in. It's now my parents' house. They've lived there for 30 odd years now, and it's those 10, they had 10 kids, one died in the 50s. 9 of them lived until the 90s and 2000s. And you just think generationally how things work. And then you hear things about birth rates. And I know the birth rate's a problem, but this is getting long-winded, and I don't want to just riff on this, but people don't understand. It's like, okay, there's only 2 ways to grow a country, and there's only 2 ways to fuel an economy. You have a high birth rate or you have high immigration. The reason America exploded is because we had both at the same time. Especially, and when and people forget their history, we had an immigration freeze for a long time. Like, there was no immigration in America for quite a while. And then when you had immigration plus the post-World War II boom.
Or certain kinds that were shut out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was, they shut it out, and let's not rehash all that now. But when you have immigration and a birth rate cranking, boom. And you see what happens after World War II in America. And America's kind of been living and drifting off that ever since, frankly, economically. I just do not understand for the life of me. And I know why it is, because it's just, there's no other excuse but prejudice, really. If you're not going to have a birth rate, you got to have immigration. And I want legal immigration. You need to weed people out. You need to vet them. I'm not saying just open borders. I'm not that guy. But the idea that you're going to have no immigration and you're going to have no birth rate, that's the end of you as a people. That's it. You're done. It's over. So I do not understand for the life of me these people that think they're going to browbeat people into a higher birth rate and we're going to get rid of immigration, but we're also going to have this state-run corruption thing where everybody gets all the money they want. Like, no, that math don't math. But that's what we're getting pitched.
I mean, the interesting thing is the US, as I said, immigrants to America tend to assimilate and do far better than other countries. So it's always weird for me to hear Americans be Americans who are extremely anti-immigration, because it's like, well, actually, it worked for the most part in the US. People, you tend to attract the best and the brightest and people who want to be there. And we get that too here to an extent. But it's the US. The US's superpower, as it were, is that you do have this identity that people can adapt before they even come there. This whole idea of Americans who are born abroad and coming home, that's as you said, that's absolutely necessary, especially now with the declining birth rates.
Does the birth rate? How's the birth? Because you're a single guy still, famously star of reality television.
Let's not get into that.
I wasn't going to bring it up. I'm just laying that out there. You're still a single guy, so your perspective is a little different than me. And the English perspective is very different than the American would. Like, when people just go on these rants about the birth rate, how's it land with you? Like, because it's one of those things where they're putting policy language on it, but it's really not a policy argument at all once you start listening to them. Because they don't have to do the policy stuff to make the birth rate better. They just want to rant about demographics, and they want a socially acceptable way to discuss it. Is that how you find it? Because that's kind of where it goes, especially on social media when I try to follow it.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, the other thing is, I do think it's important that, people have kids, but I don't want kids myself, absolutely not. But yeah, often the people who bring it up are they tend to be a bit weird. You're going to the Elon Musk types who they're constantly drama about the birth rate. Oh, they have this idea of, oh, well, I want a trad wife and have 5 kids, and it's just a complete fantasy. It's not based in reality at all. There are ways to talk about it, but I suppose ultimately, to an extent, the decline in birth rates is just simply a result of the fact that women have more rights now. 100 years ago, women didn't really have that many rights.
See, now that's where you start causing trouble really fast, is people get, women have more rights now. And you just said the magic word for a lot of the online guys. Well, they want the trad wife.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean by trad wife? Like, it's the old, stoic thing. Like, what do you mean by trad wife? What's a trad wife to you? Explain trad wife to me. I promise you, I've raised 4 daughters. None of them are going to be trad wives. And I'm very proud that they're not going to be. It's not that they don't have traditional values. It's not that I didn't teach them to be, upright women and behave themselves and love their country and love their God and, not be stark raving heathens and burn things down and act crazy and all that. Not that they won't have their moments or have had their moments. But none of them are going to be trad wives. I promise you. Like, you're going to have your hands full. Go shoot your shot, fellas. You're going to have your hands full. I promise you.
Well, the trad wife thing is basically essentially like playing. It's playing dolls for. It's essentially like playing with little dolls for these very strange sort of hard right men.
Go ahead and blow the comments up. I don't care. There's people that want to do that, and that's fine. I believe in freedom. If you want to do that, God bless. Knock yourself out. Run your YouTube channel. I don't care. But there's a strand of that is very, very much cosplaying for some very nefarious means. And that's not everybody. I know. Look, if you want to do that lifestyle, God bless. I'll support your right to do it to the end. But there's a very toxic strand of that stuff that is just cover story for some really dark and twisted stuff. And you hit on it. Well, one of the things with the birth rate is, 1 is medical science, and 2 is women have more rights. And you know what? Women should have more rights. Yeah. I think women not dying during childbirth like they used to do is a really good thing. I think women having freedom to have careers and be out of the home is a really good thing. But there's some people that don't think that's a good thing, but they found nomenclature to make it socially acceptable to say otherwise.
Exactly. And I think the problem is you've got the rise of these manosphere figures, which I think is sort of a slightly before, it came about sort of after I was a teenager. It was sort of came about in the last 10 years. And apparently, from what I've heard, that people, younger generations, quite a few young men, have some horrendous views. But likewise, young women are quite extreme as well. And it's this whole idea of social media turning young men and women.
Well, you're the target audience.
Poles apart.
You're 30. What are you, 31, 32 now?
32.
God, we're getting old, man. I remember when you were the young guy. You're 32 now. You're not married. You're the target audience for those guys. Yeah. You're who they're supposed to be like. You're supposed to be frustrated and angry and mad at the world and darn those women that are keeping the man down. Like, you're the target audience for it. Yeah. And you escape that somehow because you know how to read and write, number one. But, really, you're supposed to be the target audience for that. So what do you say because I'm sure you run into people that get sucked into that stuff. Mm-hmm. Especially, we just talked about it in the UK. If you're going to have a housing crisis and job crisis with that 20 to 40 demographic of male, those are people that are ripe to fall into that kind of crap. So I'm sure you're running into it. So how do you deal with it?
Well, I think for me, I've got a very individualistic outlook. Like, to me, it's not about your sex or your race or whatever. It's as a person. I think people should have the freedom, and it's all about freedom and individual responsibility. And I just don't. Women have just as much of a right to date who they want as men do, and it's the idea that you're owed something is ridiculous. And I think modern dating is quite badly optimized. I think both men and women suffer from it, but I don't think it's the fault of women. I think it's just the fault of the way it works now. Dating is all online now. It's not really that spontaneous. It's very sort of commodified, and that's not there. Women don't benefit from either. The current system is not really serving men or women. It's young men and women are being sort of driven further apart from each other, and it's quite sad to see, really, that it's becoming that way. You see, women who hate men who hate women. I just don't understand why, because it's like, well, people are individuals. And I know it sounds very, very sort of almost hippie-like and very silly, but it's still the truth. People are individuals, and you have to treat people as individuals. You can't just tie everyone in the same brush.
That's it for part 1 of our chat with Ben Harris. please make sure you check out part 2. It'll also be wherever you're getting this podcast, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, whatever platform you're using. If you're watching it on the YouTube, if you're on the Substack, we'd love to have you. HeardTellMedia.com. Make sure you subscribe there. One-stop shopping. It's free. If you want to give us money, we'll take it. You get all the content right there, right into your inbox. Never miss a thing we're doing. Also, the YouTube channel is doing really good. Please like and subscribe there, and whatever platform you're listening to right now, if you can make sure you subscribe. And if they give you an option, especially on places like iTunes, to leave a comment and a rating, please do so. That really helps us out. Lets people help find Heard Tell, and we can keep doing the work that we are doing. So go check out part 2 right now. And until then, we hope you're well. We hope you're well fed. And we'll talk to you again real soon for the next Heard Tell. All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.